Good Saturday morning, everyone. I'm First Alert meteorologist Leah Murphy. It is a bit of a gloomy start this morning, but we are going to be remaining mainly dry as we head through the rest of the afternoon hours. We could see some cloud cover lifting up and giving way to a little bit of some sunshine, but I do think we are going to stick with the cloud cover and the sun will just shine through it if it becomes thin enough. As we head through the evening hours, the cloud cover will once again thicken up, and we are watching a cold front coming through, which will be bringing us some periods of heavier rain beginning anywhere between about 10 p.m. to midnight. That will last through the overnight hours as we take a look at your 24. We'll see some periods of heavy rain even lasting through the tomorrow morning, and temperatures will be falling down into the 50s. We'll see heavier periods of rain lasting into about 10 to 11 a.m. tomorrow, and then it will become a little bit more scattered in nature as we head through the rest of the afternoon hours. So we will be looking at a pretty wet day for your day on Sunday. Highs will be getting into the 50s, and then we do look to turn a little bit unsettled and cooler as we head towards the rest of the week with a shower chance every single day for the rest of the week with highs in the middle and upper 50s to near 60 degrees. Let's check in with today's top headlines with Paris. Good morning, Paris.
Good morning, Liam. Over the border in Connecticut, one person is dead after a fuel tanker rollover and fire on the Gold Star Bridge. Witness video shows huge plumes of black smoke and flames. Those flames catching buildings underneath the bridge on fire as well. The crash had closed both sides of I-95 in Gotwin, but the northbound side has since reopened. And to the latest in East Hampton as the search continues for a new superintendent of schools following weeks of public outrage and debate. Ludlow Director of Curriculum Instruction Dr. Erica Figinski-Stark was offered the superintendent role but abruptly withdrew her name last Friday. Western Mass News obtained a copy of an email where students say Figinski-Stark posted transphobic rhetoric a multitude of times on what they believe was her Facebook account. The school committee will be discussing the superintendent search this upcoming Tuesday during a virtual meeting. And a ring of 7 men from Western Mass accused of stealing catalytic converters in Massachusetts and New Hampshire appeared in federal court yesterday.